All right, we are live, and I'm running off of 4 hours of sleep. We are going to be talking about President Joe Biden's State of the Union. It was on a Tuesday. We're going to be talking about his gaffes, his policy statements, and some of the implications surrounding his speech. We're going to talk about all of that and more on episode 335 of the In the Tank podcast. All right, welcome to the In the Tank podcast. As always, I'm your host, Donald Kendal. Joining me today, I've got a crew that you should recognize by now. Jim Lakely, VP of the Heartland Institute. How are you, good sir?
I'm doing just great. I'm eager to talk about Joe Biden's State of the Union address. I can give you my overall impression now, or I can wait for you to cue me up for it. But there's probably going to be one or two, maybe even three trademarked Jim rants today.
Jim's one-word answer for how the speech went is just a fart noise. Also joining us, we got Justin Haskins. He's the editorial director and at the Heartland Institute and director of the Socialism Research Center. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. I'm running on 4 hours of sleep.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, just like you. Too? We're in sync.
That's right.
Not the boy band. We're on the same sleep cycle. And no, there's no, weird stuff going on or anything like that. Just a coincidence. That's all.
Yeah, just a coincidence. In fact, the 4 hours that I was sleeping, Justin was awake. Yeah. Chris Talgo, senior editor at the Heartland Institute. How are you, good sir?
Doing good. I got a solid 8 hours of shut-eye last night. But I do want to correct one thing. It was not the State of the Union speech. It was the State of Ukraine speech.
Oh, okay. A little hot take off the bat from Chris. Audio-only listeners, before we get into any of these things, I just want to say that if you're listening to this on a Friday, you're an audio-only listener. If you want the show a day earlier, you can. Just by watching us live on YouTube and Rumble on Thursday at noon Central Time, you can join in the conversation, send us your comments and questions. It's possible that we'll show your comments on the screen, answer your questions during the show. Also, if you're watching us, make sure to subscribe to our new channel on YouTube called In the Tank Podcast. The podcast was hosted on the Heartland Institute channel on YouTube, but that channel was threatened by YouTube because of some of the things that we talk about. So to ensure that we don't go down the route of self-censorship, we created our own channel for this show. So help support free speech by subscribing. So I just want to throw that out there right off the bat.
Let me add something there for you, Donnie. We're actually live streaming this on the flagship Heartland Institute channel. We have to be careful about what we talk about. So just don't say all the trigger words.
Well, I just want to say one thing about... Never mind. So if you're watching this on the flagship channel of Heartland, make sure to go over to YouTube, In the Tank Podcast, subscribe to that channel so that you make sure to not miss a episode. Okay, so before we start and get into the topics at hand, we probably are going to talk about the Ukraine and Russia situation a little bit. And I know that this is a complicated foreign policy issue, so I think that it would be best to have an expert analysis from somebody in the Biden administration. We have Vice President Kamala Harris on cue to tell us basically about what's going on in Ukraine and Russia. So hit it, Kamala.
So Ukraine is a country in Europe. It exists next to another country called Russia. Russia is a bigger country. Russia is a powerful country. Russia decided to invade a smaller country called Ukraine. So basically that's wrong. And it goes against everything that we stand for. There are terms that we use. We say we respect the sovereignty, the territorial integrity of countries, right? Their independence. Russia has gone into Ukraine militarily, unprovoked, with no justification other than to exercise its power to take over another country. So essentially that's what's at stake. And we as America are saying that's wrong. And we will stand with Ukraine. in saying that that is wrong. But that's essentially where we are. That's essentially the issue. And when it comes to what we know to be principles of fairness, we know that what Russia is doing is wrong.
Very unfair.
When it comes
Yeah, it's
to
very unfair.
what needs to happen then, well, there needs to be severe consequence and accountability. And that's why you'll hear on the news that we talk about sanctions, which is
What are
basically having Russia pay a financial cost
There you
to
go.
the point that we can have a real impact, put a real hurt on their economy as a consequence for their bad behavior, which is resulting in the loss of innocent lives. And that's where we are. That's what the issue is, essentially.
Thank you, Kamala. Thank you so much for that. Very insightful. I did not know that, Russia was a bigger country than Ukraine until now. So the more you know, you got to stay informed when you're talking about these things. So thank you, Kamala Harris.
I'm surprised that she didn't describe a sanction as an economic timeout. That's where I thought she was going. I thought she was going with that. It's like a timeout, but with money. We use money timeout.
Yeah. Right.
I think that's the best way to describe it. Anytime you listen to politicians, I understand that we didn't play the beginning of that clip where the radio host set it up and said, "Could you explain this to us in layman's terms?" Right? And apparently Kamala Harris interpreted that as describe it to a 6-year-old. Yes. And the thing is, on one level, I understand her intent is I want to dumb it down. But what comes out of that, and the reason why that actually matters, is because it shows you how stupid she thinks everybody is.
Well, okay.
That's the only reason you would describe it that way. There's no other reason why you would go through that in that same way, unless you're talking to children. There is no way you would do that unless you're like, well, I guess everyone here is an idiot, and so I got to break it down to the most basic, fundamental things.
So is that what's happening? Is she just being patronizing, or is this
No, not patronizing. I think she is genuinely thinks they're idiots and has to describe it that way.
Or is she just an idiot?
No, she knows.
No, she doesn't.
You're telling me she couldn't describe more than what she did there? Of course she could.
No, I think that is the depth of the analysis that she can provide.
I'm with Chris on this.
Yeah,
really seriously do.
She is famous for not reading her briefing books. I think there was a story, what was it, Los Angeles Times or something, maybe the Atlantic or something like that, where, they leaked it out there. And the narrative was that her staff was not positioning her for success. And then some of the staff pushed back saying, well, we write all these briefing books so she actually can answer questions in a coherent fashion, and she ignores them. That's too much work for her. So no, actually, I don't think she's actually that dumb on Ukraine, but she's really
Justin,
close to that dumb.
They've been keeping her like in a dark room for the past year and a half here. Like they don't even want her to make public appearances.
And you know what? You say that, but that's actually, she was the one that they sent to Europe to negotiate with world leaders.
And how's that working out?
Did you hear her her speech to European leaders? She started off with, "Hey guys." She's a fundamentally unserious person.
She's like, "I'm from America, which is a country on the other side of the world."
That's what I mean. That's what I mean. Is it's like even by her standards, that was particularly bad. So there's no way that she goes into it. And the fact that she was set up by saying, "Can you do this in layman's terms?" That was her way of trying to do it in layman's terms. She was trying to dumb it down. And her opinion of people is that they're so stupid that she has to dumb it down to a level that is the equivalent of, like I said, like if you were describing it to like a 7 or 8 year old who's watching the news and doesn't understand what's going on. That's what that was.
When I
saw, she's not that stupid. Come on, there's no way.
No. Justin, she is that stupid because she thinks that's a good answer. She thinks that's a good answer.
Stupid thing to say.
She said it.
That's such a stupid thing to say.
The debate is she this stupid or this stupid?
Right.
That's the debate going on right now.
Well, no, look, of course, nobody is defending Kamala Harris. She's horrible in every way. I'm not defending her. It's just that when we get into these things sometimes, and it's like, well, she's stupid. And people throw this out about AOC and these other people too. And it's like, I understand they're not as smart as other people, but I mean, come on. She was the attorney general of a state. You're telling me that all she knows about this is what she said in that clip? No,
Yes.
no way.
Yes.
She
I
she
truly
has
believe
no
that.
respect for regular people, and that's what's going on there. It has nothing
When
to do
I
with how dumb
when I
she
saw
is.
her in the background of the State of the Union, I was like, oh yeah, I forgot she's vice president.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah,
like
well,
she's been
that's
kept
true.
in the dark so long.
Like I said, except for the fact that they just sent her to Europe to meet with world leaders because they
that's
were too busy keeping Joe Biden in the dark, and they didn't want him to come out of the basement.
Look-
I mean, come on.
Look, we break down pretty complicated climate and energy policy on this podcast with regularity. It's probably our number one topic. And if we talked down to our audience in such a way, we would have no listeners. We would have
I agree.
nobody
There's a thing
listening to
called
this, and
energy,
nobody would take us
which-
seriously.
powers.
Agreed.
Stuff.
I totally agree.
But it's a choice you make. She chose to speak to an audience like they're in kindergarten.
Yes,
that means
right.
that her judge, I don't actually think she's smart enough to talk about Ukraine in any coherent manner, in any sophistication whatsoever. And that's pretty much the best she could do. And I'm going to stick with that. Sorry.
Yeah,
I agree.
That's great. That's crazy.
All right.
That's so
Whatever.
nuts.
Who cares? This is a side
nuts.
show before
All
we
right.
get into our main course.
Yeah, we got a
here.
lot of other stuff to bitch about. So let's get moving.
So I suffered through the entirety of the State of the Union. Normally, I would not do this.
Wait, you told me you didn't watch it.
I didn't watch it when I talked to you. I watched it
okay.
yesterday afternoon.
I
So
see.
I
So you
watched the
watch it
entire
live.
thing. I did
got
not.
it.
I watched the first 20 minutes live, and that was enough for me.
And I watched it last night and live texted Donald as I was going through it and burning up his phone with all the stuff. So.
Right. I felt it necessary to watch the entire thing, to put myself through this. This is what I do. This is what I suffer through to provide our loyal listeners with great content. So, Jim, you watched it last night. Like you said, you live texted me
Yes,
your
right.
reactions to it. Justin, you watched it live. Chris, I know you watched a portion of it live. Did you finish it?
Yep.
Okay, sweet. So look at that. 4 for 4. We all watched the entirety of the thing. So
I didn't
just-
watch the entirety of it.
Oh, how dare you.
Donnie,
Kick 'em off.
I didn't watch
After-
the first like 15 minutes or something.
After watching it, the first thing that came to my mind was the line in Happy Gilmore when, Billy Madison, when they're at the high school auditorium and Billy Madison just gives this rambling, ridiculous answer. And I'm not going to get it verbatim, but I think the high school principal says something like, "Thank you. We're all now dumber after having heard that."
Not one sentence of that
Yeah.
was anywhere near coherent. We are all now dumber for having to listen to it. So right off the bat, before we get into substance, we got plenty of substance to get into, but there's a couple of things that, just like the Kamala Harris thing that we talked about, that I want to kind of get out of the way first. So right off the bat, I just want to say that I can't stand the pomp and ceremonious crap that surrounds this speech. I can't stand it. To me, this comes off as like, it's similar to those people that really don't like the Oscars or like the Grammys or the Golden Globes, where they talk about how this is just like industry people like sitting there patting themselves on the back for their own accomplishments or whatever. That to me is what the State of the Union is. It's just like, ladies and gentlemen, the president of the United States, and everyone's just going like crazy applauding, and Nancy Pelosi, I have the honor and privilege to introduce to you President Joe Biden, and then like the incessant clapping between every statement. I can't stand it. And like I've said a million times on this podcast, I would rather have a conversation about policy as opposed to politics. And to me, the State of the Union is nothing but political theater, and I hate it. So this is what I suffer through, again, to provide you people with good content. But comments, agree, disagree with me on that? Do you love the formalities of all of this stuff?
I think that when they disagree with something, they should get to throw something at the speaker.
Okay.
That would make it infinitely more interesting. If they had something, it doesn't have to be hard. It could be like a sock or something. Everybody's got a sock. And when they don't like that, something that the president says, yeah, marshmallow, they just throw a marshmallow at it. Yeah. That would make it more interesting. I mean, I get what you're saying. It's obnoxious, but I think it's important for Americans to be reminded of just how stupid and terrible these people are and how self-aggrandizing they are. And how much they love themselves and how important they all are and how unimportant we are in their minds and how it is political theater. I think that's all good, actually. I think that if we thought they were actually up there doing real work and working for us and that they had they were servants to us rather than the other way around, then people might be confused about reality. So this is I like it. I kind of like the tradition of of them looking like morons and everyone getting. I mean, come on.
Do you think that's
when
how it's
Nancy
perceived,
Pelosi?
though?
Are we going to play the clip when Nancy
Yes.
Pelosi gets up and does that weird
I
rubbing thing?
specially requested that.
Well, okay. I mean, think about
Should we
all
play
the
it now?
times stuff like that has happened over the years. Things like that happen almost every year. Nancy Pelosi alone has had 1 million of these kinds of things in her career. It's great. Look at her.
This
And
is Joe
this is when they're
Biden.
talking about burn pits, by the way, of people. She decided to get up and start rubbing her hands
together
with a
like
smiler in her face for some reason. I don't understand.
Like she's a fly that just landed on like some sugar thing outside.
The best thing about this State of the Union is it is the last time we will ever have to see Nancy Pelosi sitting in that chair.
Oh, that's true. That's
Really?
probably true. Yeah. Well, they're not going to keep the House, and she's 81 years old now, so she's not going to get up. Yeah, it's like she's
Well, that
standing up
doesn't
trying to
mean
do the
anything.
mashed potato incorrectly.
She
or
went out
something.
with the
She's
bang,
dancing.
man. Yep, she went
Yeah.
out with the
That
bang.
doesn't mean anything. She might hang on. You don't know.
Yeah.
Oh,
I don't know.
Well,
I could see her being the first 90-year-old Speaker of the House. That's possible.
Yeah,
Don't
you
rule
know.
it out.
yeah,
I mean,
healthier.
I get it. It's obnoxious, but it is.
well, how about,
There is something about it that I think is.
well, what do you,
you
think,
know-
Jim? From your perspective, as somebody that maybe lived through better times of the United States, where like the
When?
people that are supposed to be leading us are a little bit more respected or something like that. Back in like the 19 aughts. And like you're also like a fan of the royalty in like England and stuff, which is nothing but crap like
Oh,
this.
good
So
point.
what do you
Yeah.
think?
I would like it if we had something more like the Prime Minister's question period, like they do in the House of Commons and also in Canada, where you get to, members of the House get to just confront the Prime Minister and basically give him or her hell, and that's actually pretty good political theater, and it's actually more, I think, pretty healthy for a democracy for people to do that. Because Lauren Boebert, when Joe Biden was talking once again about his son Beau, who he implies died in combat, did not, and talks about the flag draped coffins coming back, and Lauren Boebert said 13 of them, and basically blaming him for the withdrawal of Afghanistan, in which 13 U.S. service members died. And that's terrible. That she's heckling the president of the United States. It's like, get real. It is kind of neat. I mean, it is kind of historic. It is something that's unique to America. I mean, I attended a State of the Union address live when I was working at the Washington Times. One of the ones that George W. Bush did. It's kind of a distraction in the middle of winter with nothing, maybe with nothing else going on. I mean, there is a lot going on in the news right now.
Yeah.
But the thing you have to, can anyone really even remember a historic State of the Union address? I mean, all the pundits on TV say, this is historic and all that stuff, but by and large, these things are not remembered, right? Nobody really remembers. I mean, actually, you might remember George Bush. He laid out his axis of evil in his State of the Union address, but you could probably count on one hand if you're age 50 or older. And maybe think of 2 or 3 lines that you can remember from his State of the Union address. But, seeing Joe Biden do it, mumbling his way through, not being able to get through any words. I mean, it just basically exposed Joe Biden for who he is. He's always been a blowhard and a jerk and a nitwit. And, what's that saying? It's like always wrong, but never in doubt. That applies, as we just saw, to his vice president as well. I mean, Joe Biden is not a leader. He's not a policy wonk. His defining characteristic is a confidence and ambition in inverse proportion to his intellect and his talent. He has tried and failed to fake his way to the presidency for 30 years. And then finally a global pandemic, throughout, let's just say it made a pretty chaotic election in 2020 that finally put him over the finish line. And now we see that Joe Biden is who Joe Biden is. If you had a clip from 10 years ago when he was vice president of the United States speaking, and now it is a completely different person. And we have this mumbling, obviously a man in intellectual decline, trying to lead the United States. Joe Biden has never been a leader, which is good because he's always been wrong about everything. Every major public policy in this country, he's been wrong about for 50 years. So, overall, was that exactly what I expected? I actually skipped the pomp and circumstance. I just went right to his words. It's exactly the State of the Union address I expected to get out of Joe Biden. It was out of touch. It was dishonest. It was utterly forgettable. No one's going to remember a damn thing he said last night. I mean, we might, because we kind of pay attention to it, but Americans are not going to remember any of this stuff, except for the fact that he could barely get a word past his lips without mumbling something and skipping syllables, and frankly, just speaking in clear English. That is the only thing that makes the State of the Union address memorable.
Yeah, we do have video evidence of a lot of those gaffes and mumbles and stuff. I do have it teed up already, Jim, so you don't have to worry about it. But Chris, do you have any input onto my rejection of all that pomp and ceremonious crap?
In general, I agree that all the pomp and ceremony and all of that is, that's just par for the course. Washington, D.C., they, care more about, themselves and they, do the nation. But Donnie, what struck me the most was the lack of cohesion throughout the speech. It seemed like it was, I broke it down into two parts. The first half was all about Ukraine. And then the second half, Joe Biden actually reversed course on many things, saying that he wants to fund the police. He wants to, make sure that the border is safe and secure. He wants to fight inflation. So he, it was just this like smorgasbord of things that he was just saying that were completely out of line with the policies that he has pushed for the past year. Yeah. So I think it was a desperate attempt by the Democratic Party to say, where's the polling going? And we're going to try to make Americans think that we are in line with that polling. But I think that most Americans saw it for what it was. It was a desperate attempt in a midterm election year for the Democratic Party, who hold, both houses of Congress and the White House, to say, oh, actually, we are, pursuing the policies that you want us to pursue. Yeah. When we all know that they are.
Yeah. I want to get to that point, but a little bit later after we go through some of the actual content of the speech and all the policy stuff. But one more just kind of sideshow thing before we get into the meat of this podcast, which is what I just teased, a series of gaffes of President Joe Biden. So let's watch this.
What used to be called the Rust Belt become the home of a significant resurgence of manufacturing. Putin may circle Kyiv with tanks, but he'll never gain the hearts and souls of the Iranian people.
The Iranian people.
He'll never extinguish their preventing Russia's central bank from defending the Russian ruble. A pound of Ukrainian people, proud people, pound for pound. There's simply nothing beyond our capacity, increasing the productive capacity of our economy. I call it building a better America. We won't stop. Because you can't build a wall high enough to keep out a vaccine. The vaccine can stop the spread of these diseases. As one people, one America, the United States of America. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you. Go get him.
Go get him.
Hey, Donnie, can you just pause for right there 1 second? I mentioned this to Donnie yesterday, but Justin and Jim, do you find it strange that Kamala Harris wore an all brown, monochromatic suit? Because I think she did it so that she would blend in with the chair.
I don't think she picked.
She's a chameleon. She's invincible.
No, I think that's evidence.
She's not even there.
I think that's further evidence of them just keeping her in a back room. They don't really want to be there. It's like she had to sit there. That's part of all of this, right? So they're like, okay, well, maybe if we put her in this suit that makes her blend in with the chair, people won't even notice that she's there.
I mean, really everything. Funny. Yeah, I really think she did it on purpose.
That's really funny.
Those were just the highlights. My favorite one is him saying that referring to the Ukrainians as the Iranian people. That was my absolute favorite.
I think it was Uranian.
I don't know. I listened to it a handful of times. It's possible, but it came off as
Iranian. So here's the thing. Iranian, Uranian. It's not a place that he should be talking about, is the bottom line. The thing, but isn't it good that people saw that? I mean, that's the thing. Isn't it good? Yeah, it's stupid. It's a terrible speech. It was really poorly written and everything. Good. I'm glad. We're always complaining that Joe Biden doesn't do enough press conferences and he doesn't do, but then he gets up and gives a speech and we all complain that we don't want to hear him and he's terrible. It's like, I want Joe Biden on TV every day. Because if Joe Biden were on TV every day and every American had to watch him for 10 minutes a day, there is no chance that his approval rating would be 2% if that had to happen. And so that's what I want. I want more Joe Biden. I want more Joe Bidens, and I want it mandatory. I want one, we always do this thing. If you could pass one law, that's my one law. If I could pass one law, it'd be everyone has to watch Joe Biden speak for 10 minutes every day, every single day. That's the rule.
You'll lose all faith in
they would lose all faith in him, all faith in the Democratic Party. It would be the greatest thing of all time. That's what we need. So I say more Joe Biden, not less. More Nancy Pelosi doing weird things with her hands, not less. More Kamala Harris dressing like the chair she's sitting in, not less. More weird clapping and obvious lying and everything else, not less. That's what I want.
Right. Oh, yeah. So
I just don't want Xi Jinping to be watching that, though.
That's good point.
Well, people need to think about that.
Starts off with 10-15 minutes talking about Ukraine, as you probably would expect. That seems to be the most important thing going on in the world right now. So we spent about 10 minutes, trying to take credit for faction coalition building and all of this stuff in Europe. And, you tell me, was there anything in the Ukraine section that you thought objectionable or, worth commenting on? Because I thought it was fairly boilerplate.
It was fairly boilerplate, but actually I was my expectations are pretty low, but I thought he did pretty well in that spot, so give him credit.
Yeah. In fact, I said to Chris when I was watching it, I was like, I could see Donald Trump giving almost an identical speech in that first 10-15 minutes, with the exception of maybe, downplaying NATO and upplaying us, but that's about it.
Yeah. He would have told Putin that I'm going to nuke you, maybe.
And then let's see. Then he starts talking about the pandemic stuff and the economic aftermath. He talks about this. This was one of my first big eye rolls, which he was talking about the most jobs ever created was under his administration coming out of the pandemic. It's just like, again, half of these comments, Chris, sorry if they sound familiar because I said them to you. My reaction to that was like, no, you didn't create jobs. You just allowed people to have them again, because that's all the people that lost jobs was a result of restrictions in place, not allowing people to go to work or go to eat at restaurants or a whole bunch of other service industry things. So you didn't create them. You just allowed them to exist again. Thoughts, comments?
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. That's been one of the most frustrating things. The White House has been, and Joe Biden's various social media accounts have been putting out various charts and graphs and statements for months now, talking about how incredible the economy is, how it's roaring back. And they'll show these charts, that bar graphs, where their bar graph, it's jobs added under a president's first year or something. And Joe Biden has all these jobs added and compared to all these other presidents. And it's like, as you just pointed out, those jobs were not jobs added. Those are jobs that they murdered, okay, like 2 years ago. And now, because they've allowed the economy to open up again, which had nothing to do with Joe Biden, because he had nothing to do with the vaccine being approved, which is the real reason why economies started opening up again. That was all with the Trump administration and private pharmaceutical companies and all that stuff. Some of the jobs, most of them, but not even all of them, have come back. So to say you've added jobs when you have fewer full-time jobs today than you did at the start of the pandemic is not just, it's just the most dishonest thing you could possibly come up with.
Right.
You didn't add any jobs. All you did was, like you said, allow the economy to function as it normally would. And some of the jobs came back, not all of them. And in fact, we would have had more jobs come back if they weren't, if the Biden administration and Democrats in Congress weren't paying people for the first 10 months of their administration to stay home, and paying them more money to stay home than they were earning, or almost as much money to stay home than they were earning when they actually were working their jobs. So he did everything possible not to have jobs added. Right. And then he comes around and claims that he makes these victory claims about how many jobs have been added. That was egregious. I don't think anybody believes that unless they love him and they believe anything he says. Most people know the economy is not doing so well right now. And I don't think that he's fooling anybody with his stupid bar graphs and his horrible speeches, but he's trying. Right. That's the plan, but I don't think it's working.
Yeah, to me, like I said, that was like the first biggest eye roll out of a series of giant eye rolls that happened during the speech. The next section, he starts getting into infrastructure, and this is probably the closest that he really got to like climate change stuff, unless I'm forgetting something. He talked about the wanting to build 50,000 or 500,000 charging stations for electric cars.
Yeah.
And how he wanted to, make sure that everything that we build in the country is buy American, and all the manufacturing is going to be in America, and all of this. And he one of his first guests that he introduced outside of the Ukrainian ambassador was a guy from Intel. And he was talking about this big factory that they're going to build in the Midwest. As long as we can pass this, American Innovation Act or something like that. And I don't know, all of that just kind of came off as like, when he was specifically getting into bringing manufacturing back to the United States and this factory that's going to build microchips and all of that, I thought, like, I don't know, is this really playing to your base, or at least the radical wing of the base, the far left? It's like, okay, we're going to do a bunch of manufacturing and new like iron smelting and stuff. It's like, are we going to open up mines in the United States to pull that iron ore out of the ground and all the raw materials that we would need to build all the computer chips? Is that going to be mined here in the United States, or are we going to get that from somewhere else?
And what's going to power all these new manufacturing plants that he's going to build? We're not doing that on solar and wind power. And we don't want to build nukes. So, it's actually not going to happen. Board member Steve Malloy, board member of the Heartland Institute, also his Twitter handle is Junk Science, @Junk Science. It's absolutely a must follow. He had tweeted during the State of the Union. He watched it live. He said, climate change is an existential threat and must be addressed by an all-out, all-government effort. That's why he breezed by climate and energy in like 20 seconds.
That's right. That's right.
and then even a CNN fact checker, because you talked about the charging stations. leftist CNN, their fact checker said, touting the infrastructure law, Biden said, we'll build a national network of 500,000 electric vehicle charging stations. Partly because of his proposed $15 billion allocation ended up as a $7.5 billion bill. Analysts say it's not certain that there's enough money to meet that goal anytime soon. And he also, and another fact check on Biden from CNN, Biden suggested his plan would, quote, cut energy costs for families an average of $500 a year by combating climate change.
Oh, yeah.
That $500 estimate from a research firm is for savings in 2030, not during the next 8 years. It requires both significant federal and state action. So when CNN is fact-checking your leftist Democrat president, that's not good.
Yeah. The $500 in savings or whatever is from government action of them cutting you a $500 check. Actually, a $600 check, because they have to make up for the price increase from all the crap that they're doing.
Are we gonna talk about the Rashida Talib thing later?
That's later.
Okay,
yeah.
Then I'll get to that later. But I will just say that you sort of set this whole thing up by saying, are the leftists, are they buying this whole, just the charging stations is appeal to the left? The answer is obviously no, because of that Rashida Talib thing.
Yeah.
I mean,
you're
that's
right.
the obvious answer. So
we'll
I'll just
definitely
throw
get
that
to
out
that.
there and we'll get to it later.
We'll definitely get to that.
And of course not. The other reason this speech did not have leftists in mind is the defund the police thing. I mean, when he started chanting "fund the police," I was worried that the squad might kill him or something. I don't know. I mean, I was really worried. I wasn't sure what was going to happen there.
In the broadcast that I watched, they only showed AOC like stand up and applaud once, and it was when he was talking about the charging station. I think.
Right. That's probably the only thing that
AOC was never happy. But Donnie, one other thing on the economic front, Joe Biden claimed that the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017 passed by President Donald Trump and the GOP Congress, that was a windfall for the 1%. He went through all that, all those lies again. And we know for a fact at the Heartland Institute, because Justin Haskins wrote an excellent policy paper about this, that the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act actually overwhelmingly benefited working and middle-class Americans. So, I mean, the guy is just not beholden to the truth. So he gets up there and he just spouts these, these blatant lies. And, it's difficult because, days later, we can go and we can fact check it. But in real time, I think, unfortunately, a lot of people said, wow, well, yeah, that sounds good. But one other just quick thing, I think part of the reason why Biden was, first of all, he did such a short speech, but also why it was such like a wide-ranging speech, because he didn't have many things to run on. He didn't
Right.
have, hey, my first year we did A, B, C, D, and these are all the great accomplishments. That's typically what State of the Union addresses are about. You spend
Yeah.
half your time going over the successes, and then you also lay the groundwork for, hey, this is what we want to do. But
Right.
Biden's policies are so unpopular. He's having to reverse course in real time, and the defund the police thing, and all the other stuff. That just goes to show he knows that his midterm election prospects are just going down the tubes.
Yeah, and I have a theory on that, and again, we'll get to that after we go through the kind of the laundry list of stuff that he talked about in the speech. Then he got into inflation, and I think we have a clip of this, right, Jim? We could just play his little statement here on inflation. Go ahead.
Yes, economic genius, Joe Biden.
Prices of automobiles went way up, especially used vehicles as well. And so we have a choice. One way to fight inflation is to drive down wages and make Americans poorer. I think I have a better idea to fight inflation.
What?
Lower your costs, not your wages.
Oh,
Folks,
Hey,
It's that simple. It's that simple, guys. Lower the costs.
that's
What are
it.
you gonna do?
That's it. It's that simple. Why didn't anyone think of
more
that?
cars and semiconductors in America. More
that'll
infrastructure
lower
and
costs.
innovation in America. More goods
Same
moving
cost.
faster and cheaper in America. More jobs where you can earn a good living in America. Instead of relying on foreign supply chains, let's make it in America.
all right.
Prices of automobiles
first
are
off,
way up,
Why?
especially
Why
used
are?
vehicles as well.
That sounds a lot
Sorry.
like the Donald Trump agenda. Just saying.
Yeah, why are all of those things being made in other countries? Why aren't they being made in the United States already? Oh, I wonder if it's because of the overburden of regulations and stuff in the United States that makes it economically infeasible to make certain things.
And how about the fact that Joe Biden's a globalist and he's been pushing globalist policies for the past 40 years in Washington, D.C. And now all of a sudden he's an America First guy? Like, give me a
He
break.
just got through telling us at some point, either before or after that, I think it was before that, he just got through telling us that we need to raise taxes on everybody who has money
Right.
in
Right.
order to make them pay their fair share. But now he's saying just lower your costs and we won't have to lower wages. It's
Yeah,
like,
I want to hear his solution for poverty. Just stop being poor.
yeah, stop being poor. It's that simple.
Wow,
It's
great.
honestly,
Thank
it's
you,
that
Joe.
simple. Just don't be poor. Just
Yeah.
don't do it.
Yeah, he definitely tried to blame businesses for rising prices. That was definitely the theme of his comments when it came to inflation, which between that and what we talked about last week with them trying to blame everything from the supply chain disruptions to inflation on what's going on in the Ukraine and Russia, it's like this is their talking point. And it's just evidence that they don't really have a solution to inflation other than just trying to blame it on someone that's other than themselves.
Well, I texted to you, Don. I'm looking at my text thread from you yesterday, last night. Thanks for being so patient with me as your phone was blowing up, as I sent you about 50 texts. But it's like there was a lot of Marxist claptrap in this speech, actually, to be honest. And it's just this idea that just lower the costs. I mean, there's a difference between cost and price in an economic sense. And Joe Biden doesn't seem to know the difference. Like I said at the beginning of the podcast, he's a nitwit. He doesn't understand these things, I don't think. But he's also influenced, or at least has Marxists teaching him about economics. It's like, to solve inflation, lower your costs and raise your wages. It's like, hey, that corner 7-Eleven gas station, lower your gas prices. Lower the price of milk and sodas and bread and snacks. Oh, and also pay all of your employees $15 an hour.
Problem solved.
Problem solved.
You're forgetting the higher taxes. You also got to pay more in taxes too.
So
Somehow fit that into the equation. It's just
right. It's like, why didn't anybody think of this before? It's so simple. We've never had a president who just broke it down so simply for us. All you
Old
gotta
lunch
do is
pail Joe.
lower costs. That's it. Just lower your costs. See, piece of cake.
Yeah, that's that
People
was
actually buy into that stuff. I mean, Justin, we talked about how stupid people think their audiences are. Does even Joe Biden and his handlers think that the American people are so stupid that they just think you could just say lower your costs and that will solve inflation? That they think that a third of all inflation is because of automobile prices? Most of this country does not buy a new car every year, or even a new used car every year, or a used car every year.
Yeah.
Yet that's why milk is like almost twice as much as it was a year ago. Come on.
On its face, it makes no sense. And so I don't think anybody looks at that and says, wait a minute, the cost of cars are high, so the eggs are high. That doesn't even make sense. So you want to cut costs, but you want to raise taxes. That doesn't really make sense either. I think that he's hoping if he can just say things that are negative about rich people and business owners, that people who don't think about it for more than a second will just be like, yep. They're the problem if they're not paying their fair share, as if paying their fair share would have anything to do with curbing inflation. Like, what does that have how does that make any sense? I don't even understand the argument that the guy is trying to make, even in his incoherent, ridiculous ramblings. It's like, it's just, I don't even know what he's going for here other than, and the worst part of it is this is written down. This isn't off the cuff Q&A on the way to the helicopter and some guy shouts, hey, Joe, how do we fix inflation? And he says, lower the costs. That's not what's going on. He had a speech vetted by supposed policy experts. 1,000 people signed off on it. He went through 7 drafts over 2 months, probably, I'm guessing, probably more than that. These are some of the most crafted speeches in the universe of speeches. And somehow that's what they came up with. They're all sitting around the room saying, boy, how are we going to deal with this inflation thing? You know, let's just say lower the costs. How about that? I don't even understand that.
But this is how stupid the Biden administration thinks Americans are. He also said that to cure inflation, we have to pass Build Back Better, which will cost trillions of dollars. We all know this is a fundamental economic, premise. When you pump more money into the system, the money that you have is worth less, hence inflation. Come on.
Yeah, well, when he starts talking about like corporations paying their fair share, I already brought up the Intel guy, right? He had the Intel guy. Everyone celebrated the Intel guy because he was suggesting investing $100 billion in some new microchip manufacturing plant in the Midwest. But it was all predicated on whether or not they can get the American Innovation Act passed. And I looked very briefly, so take this with a grain of salt, into what the American Innovation Act is. And one of the components of it is like a $200 billion investment in different products that will help us, be 21st century compliant and all this stuff or something like that. And it was just like, okay, so if Intel building this giant manufacturing plant is predicated on whether or not we can pass this, I can only assume that is just filled with tax incentives and all of these things to get Intel to actually buy this. So it's like, and then fast forward 5 years, it's like, are the left now going to be like demonizing Intel for not paying their fair share because they're taking advantage of a bill that you wanted to pass so that they could build this power plant this manufacturing plant? It's so contradictory. Your head will explode.
Yeah, it kind of proves that whatever taxes they might end up paying, higher taxes, if they pay higher taxes at all, it won't amount to the subsidies that they're going to get from the government.
Exactly.
Otherwise, they would just build it right now. What's stopping them? They've got more money now than they will when they're paying their fair share, right? So what are they waiting for? I don't understand. Just build it. It's like, obviously, they're waiting for a handout. And if they're waiting for a handout, that means their fair share is actually lower net than what they're paying now. So, I mean, it's just so frustrating.
I was thinking when he was talking about like fair share and stuff, was the Intel guy like sweating? He was just standing up for an applause. And then 10 minutes later, it's just like, oh, okay. Don't recognize me anymore. Jim, we're going to do COVID next. So if you want to get that clip pulled up. But after that was just kind of like a hodgepodge of different things. He was talking about healthcare and how he wants to cut the cost of prescription drugs by, making them cheaper. Boom.
There you
easy. Another list of free stuff, free child care, free this, free that, subsidize this, subsidize that. A whole, again, just to Chris's point, it was just like a laundry list of things that he would want to do theoretically, ideally. Then he talked about the investing in police. He said solution is not to defund the police, it's to fund the police, which, again, it's like, okay, so you're just like dismissing all of the talking points that was going on in the summer of 2020. but whatever.
What was funny about that though is that was one of like maybe 2 or 3 times where all the Republicans got up too.
Yeah.
And so what was really funny is like everyone's up clapping, but half of them are clapping like in a mocking way. And the other half are clapping in a like legitimate, we got to show our support, but we don't really believe this way. It's just like, this is totally ridiculous.
Yeah. And I know I share with you guys a video, 7 full minutes video of Democrats saying defund the police. We need to defund the police. We need to take that money away. We need to, in fact, Ilhan Omar saying that we need to completely dismantle the Minneapolis Police Department. I mean, and so for that, and so for Joe Biden to now say, you know, we need to fund the police. I mean, it's just, I mean, gaslighting is the word of the year for 2022, and will continue to be at this rate.
Did we talk about the mask? Are we going to talk about the masks? Is that what's next?
We're going to talk about COVID and stuff.
So COVID next. So what I have written down here, that we shouldn't just learn to live with the virus. And then he starts going into how our kids need to be back in school. And he was basically, it seemed like he was almost trying to declare victory on COVID. That's how it came off to me. But there was even some contradictory stuff in this. So Justin or Jim, you want to take the first whack at this, or should we play this clip first, Jim? What do you want?
Yeah, maybe we should play the clip.
Let me see if I can play the clip.
Let's play this. Look at this stunning man and this determination on his face for all those video listeners, video watchers, as opposed to the audio only listeners.
How much? I mean, how much fake tanner do you think he uses?
Well, compared to our last president, come on, we can't give him any crap for that.
No, you can give him both crap. I think that's fair. This is a nonpartisan think tank, so when it comes to tanner used by presidents, we can be fair and balanced.
That's a nonpartisan issue.
Okay, I put your. You got to get your clip out of there, Donnie. I put yours up by accident.
You could put up both. We could both share a screen.
I can't play. Anyway, here we go. We're gonna
no,
do
that's
this right
not
now.
it.
There we go. Oops.
This is why we need a producer.
No, this is why you need to stop sharing your screen, man. Unshare it when you're done. All right, here we go.
It's the loss of life. Let's use this moment to reset. So stop looking at COVID as a partisan dividing line.
Oh yeah.
Oh God.
That's a line that Jim's going to jump on.
Let's stop seeing each other as enemies. Start seeing each other.
Is that Jerry Seinfeld's shirt?
Fellow Americans. Look.
All right, let's just stop it right there, because I know Jim's got plenty to say about that. Let's not have COVID be this dividing line between Americans. Jim, surely, Jim, it's partisan hackery, mostly on the right, that's causing a divide when it comes to COVID, right, Jim?
Yeah, I got a little triggered by that last night when I was watching the replay of this and texting you for Joe Biden. I mean, we talked about this on the pod a couple of weeks ago, I think, and I kind of went off. But the idea now that Democrats and Joe Biden in particular is saying, "Hey, man, let's not think about people who opposed us on COVID policy as anything other than just fellow Americans. Let's treat this like a disease." And he whispers things like that. That also triggers me. But no, you don't get to stand up there and say that. You're the person. Joe Biden and his people said that this was going to be a winter of severe illness and death for the unvaccinated. That the unvaccinated were going to stress our hospitals to the breaking point because they're so selfish. They didn't do their patriotic duty and get vaccinated like me and like Fauci said you should. By the way, Fauci's now in the witness protection program. No one's seen him for 2 weeks.
Yeah, where is he?
But you don't get to stand there and say that now. You just do not have any moral standing to say that. You pitted this country who are you tried to pit the vaccinated against the unvaccinated. You said that everyone that didn't have the jab was going to die. They were going to have a winter of misery and death. You cannot now at the State of the Union address say, "Hey, man, we're all Americans. Let's just treat this like a disease and stop treating and stop otherizing those that you spent the last 2 years otherizing." You just don't get to do that. And he was, never called out on it. If he should have been heckled by anybody in that State of the Union address, it should have been then. And in fact, a lot of Republicans should have just stood up and walked out, because this administration and its bureaucratic state has divided this country. Has called Joe Biden advocated that people who didn't get the shot should be fired.
Right,
He sued.
exactly.
He said every nurse and doctor who doesn't want to get the jab, or if you work in a nursing home and you accept Medicaid, which is everybody, you're out of a job. Now, you don't get to say you're fired if you don't get the jab, and now, hey, let's all get along. This is, again, gaslighting is the term of 2022, and it was offensive to me and should be to anybody, whether you have the vaccine or you don't, that our president could stand up there and say something like that.
Yeah, there was another clip, and we won't show it because we'll be flagged for copyright things, but it was an SNL clip that I showed to you guys. And it was basically the clip now, again, 2 years after all this pandemic stuff started. It was lampooning people that like couldn't take anything that was outside of the narrative, like seriously, or and somebody was like, oh yeah, I read this article that was like masks weren't that effective. They're like, oh, we can't say that. They were like mocking that idea, where they were demonizing people that were doing that, for the last 2 years. So it's like now they feel safe to take that position when there's like absolutely no risk to take that position. I thought that was like so. Jim, you mentioned it, like, no, you can't do this now. After acting the way that you have the past 2 years, you can't now take the side of like rationality. And it's like now SNL is trying to do that too. That triggered me. And it's very similar with Joe Biden in this speech.
But I think the reason is very simple. It's, a midterm election year, and they know that the American people are sick and tired of, the COVID restrictions. So therefore, they are trying to do it a total about face and say, yeah, we were actually never for the restrictions to begin with. And actually, even though Joe Biden was wearing a mask the day before the State of the Union while walking outside alone in a field, right. Now it's all okay.
Right. Yeah.
So this is just pure politics.
I do want to get to two other things, Jim. So if there's any other COVID related stuff that you want to mention, I'll give you a minute to do so. But I want to get to two other things.
Now let's get on to the two other things before I go crazy.
Real quick, one last thing that he mentioned. This was another one of my like big eye roll moments. He was talking about like gun control stuff. And he was talking about the gun liability shield and how gun manufacturing companies are the only ones that can't be sued or something like that. And again, it was just like, that sounds crazy when you just like take it at face value if what he's saying is true. But in reality, it's not true. If you were to have a gun and you're using it properly and you shoot it and it explodes in your face, you can sue that company. I'm almost 100% sure about that. In the same way, or on the opposite side of that coin, if somebody uses a car to run somebody over, that person can't sue Toyota. Right. So it's like these are the things that they're just trying to smash together and pretend that it's an unfair advantage for gun companies.
I think that there are the actual legal, written into the law protections for gun companies in those cases, so that a person who goes and shoots another person, the gun company can't be held liable just because they use their gun. Of course not.
No.
But I don't think I don't think anyone had to do that for cars or anything else, because nobody in the universe tried to apply that same stupid logic to anything else. So courts have thrown those cases all out a million times. Guns are the only time we've even entertained the concept of something like that. That's why we have laws that protect those kinds of things.
Yeah, so that wasn't even one of the two things I wanted to get to. That was just a side point.
But Donnie, just real quick, what's funny about that is the only industry that is, basically free from being sued, big tech.
Yeah, right.
Well, not only that,
government employees, you can't sue individual government employees and make them personally liable when they screw you over. Can't do that in most cases.
There's a couple of really big corporations right now that can't be sued over their vaccines, and that would be
point.
Pfizer and Moderna.
Good point.
So you can't, and still to this day, 2 years later, they can't be sued no matter what damage that vaccine does to you. So give me a break.
So real quickly, I'll just breeze past this because I do want to get to the Talib thing. So one of the things that I want to get to is that I saw an article, I think it was an article, maybe it was like a Twitter thread or something, that suggested that Biden's State of the Union just turned into a campaign speech at some point, basically after the Ukraine stuff. It just turned into a campaign speech. And I think that this is the case. And I think that it was basically, this is like a Hail Mary attempt to salvage his administration, the image of his administration, and appeal to the country before we really start the run up to the midterm elections. I really think that's what it was. I mean, we talked at a month ago about how this is just like the worst first year that like an administration's had in the last memorable history. So yeah, I really think that this is just like, well, let's just do like a campaign speech on a national platform where all of the eyes of the country, relatively speaking, are on us. So I think that's the case. I was going to open that up to comments or whatever, but I want to get to this last part. So I'm just going to take that as fact. Anyways, like with most, if not all, State of the Union addresses, the member of the opposing party delivers a response address. During the Trump years, response addresses were given by, I think, like Bernie Sanders, and was that Abrams from Georgia did one or something like that?
The All-Stars.
That's right. This year, not only did a Republican present a response to the State of the Union, but so did a Democrat. I think it's the first time ever. Is that right, Chris?
Chris
told me that, right?
First time ever.
A Democrat, Representative Rashida Talib, delivered a response to Biden's State of the Union. In it, she talked up the progressive wing of the party, took shots at moderates like Manchin and Christian Sinema, and outlined other policy objectives that Democrats should pursue, and that were basically either glossed over by Joe Biden or just completely ignored. AOC, in an interview, was somewhat critical of Biden's address, saying that it left a little bit to be desired. She said he basically only paid lip service to climate change and some other things that we should be doing a lot more of. A couple of Democrats have come out and said that the Rashida Tlaib's response was counterproductive. Democrat Representative Josh Gottheimer from New Jersey said the speech from Talib was like slashing her own tires or keying their own car. And then even Bill Maher, during his show on HBO, said that Talib's speech was like sacking your own quarterback. So a very similar analogy to the last one today. But thoughts on this? I mean, we've talked in the past about the perceived growing schism in the Democratic Party between the more socialist side and the more establishment side. Justin, you were the first kind of hint towards this. Is Talib's speech more evidence of that, or do you think something else is going on?
No, this isn't more evident. Well, it's more evidence. It's not necessarily more significant evidence. We've known that this rift has existed for a long time. What it is evidence of is how weak Joe Biden is and how vulnerable he is, because you would never have this happen with a president, a sitting president who's in his first term, especially, who has any popularity at all. If he had any popularity at all, you would never do this to your own president, because again, you're sacking your own quarterback, you're keying your own car, you're doing all these horrible things to yourself. Why would you do that? The only reason you would do that is if you think it actually benefits you to hurt your own party's president more than it helps you to just get up there and let him say whatever he wants and then not respond to it. So it shows you where Joe Biden's presidency is, which is essentially in the trash can. Right. And I think that's really what the sign of this is. Rashida Talib is a socialist, literally. She's part of the Democratic Socialists of America, the largest socialist organization. She's part of AOC's, that whole squad group that AOC is in with Ilhan Omar and others. And so she's far, far left at a time when Joe Biden probably should be moving to the center. And I think they know that, and they're trying to drag him, back maybe a little bit. This might be kind of a warning shot against him. Don't cross us, or you're going to get more of this kind of infighting. But at this point, I think everyone has just given up, to be totally honest, on Joe Biden. I think they know it's over. I think they know he's toast. He'll never get to a second term. And they're all just positioning themselves now for the future, because it's done. When Build Back Better died, that was it for them. If they can't even get that passed, then nothing that the far left wants is going to get passed, because that wasn't even what they wanted. So I think more than anything, that's what it's a sign of. He's just a disaster.
I think the squad is also very bitter, because they thought that they had a deal in which if the bipartisan infrastructure bill was passed, it would have to pass with Build Back Better, and they got played, And I think that they are really angry about that. And then one other quick thing, the word equity did not appear in the State of the Union, and I think that is somewhat telling, because Joe Biden was not doubling down on the far left rhetoric. He was, and I don't believe that there was sincerity behind this, but he was trying to pivot toward the center. But I think he was doing that purely for political reasons, and I think that the squad and the far left, Rashida Talib and her ilk are saying, "Oh no, you're not going to do that. We are going to, hold your feet to the fire." I don't think it's going to work.
Jim, comments on this?
It is amazing. I mean, that's actually something that isn't talked about more or recognized more for how unusual it is for Rashida Talib, a founding member of the squad, the leftist squad, to give a response to their own president. I mean, this would be this wasn't even done during Trump's presidency when, heck, the first year and a half, 2 years of Trump's presidency, he could barely get Republicans to speak to him, let alone help him out with legislation.
That's a good point.
And so, they didn't, there was a good anti-Trump faction in the Republican Party. They didn't have a response to Trump. If a president you should do that against, it would have been him, but it didn't happen on the Republican side. And yeah, Chris, on this thing with equity, when Biden talked in the State of the Union address, about all the testing, all the COVID tests that are coming out. By the way, where's mine? Where's everybody's COVID test? We've actually said, all right, we're going back to normal. COVID is not really a crisis anymore. And we're still waiting another couple months for the 500 million COVID tests to come here from China, I suppose. But, there was all this talk about how everything in fighting COVID has to be done with equity as our starting point. So if you are, a minority, if you are poor, all that kind of stuff, the whole equity thing, where basically if you're a white male like me, you're at the back of the line. No more talk about that stuff anymore. None, zero. And they think that they can get away with it never happened. Again, this is all gaslighting. We know what your agenda was that whole first year, Joe Biden. This did not really reflect it in any meaningful way. And people are not stupid. Right. His polling numbers have not budged an inch since after this speech. And I don't expect him to go up at all for the rest of the year.
Yeah, there's an article that I have in the show notes that I was going to kind of open up for discussion, but I'll just end with it. I think it was from the Federalist, where it was saying that, the corrupt media predictably hype Biden's dishonest State of the Union speech. And it was going through and it has a list of different tweets and reactions from blue checkmark Twitter and all of that. People like Stephen Colbert and some Democrats, and just talking about how, this was such a great speech and all of that. And to me, I feel like that's just kind of an AstroTurf attempt at trying to make this speech seem bigger than it actually is. And in reality, I don't think that the speech did resonate with anybody, and I don't think it'll be memorable. They're not going to write about this in any textbooks in the future or anything like this. We're the last people to be talking about this. Once this podcast ends, nobody will talk about the State of the Union ever again. So that's how much of an impact Joe Biden left. We are out of time, gentlemen. Any last words? Anything you want to get off your chest? Words of wisdom? Anything like that? Hearing nothing, I will end the show by saying thank you for everyone that tuned into this episode of the In the Tank podcast. If you like our show, please subscribe, write a review for us on iTunes. I greatly appreciate it. If you're an audio-only listener, like I said at the beginning of the podcast, you could check out the live stream if you join us on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Rumble, and watch us live at noon on Thursdays. You can join in the conversation, leave your comments, throw some questions in there. Maybe we'll throw them up on the screen, answer your comments on the fly or questions on the fly. If you'd like, you can follow us on Twitter at In the Tank Pod. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions for the show, feel free to email us at inthetankpodcast@gmail.com. Jim Lakely, where can the fine people find you?
You can find me at J Lakely on Twitter, at Heartland Inst on Twitter, and always go to heartland.org.
Fantastic. Justin Haskins, same question for you.
At Justin T. Haskins on Facebook and Socialist Twitter and Parler and Getter. And I'm trying to figure out Truth Social, still working on that one because I want to be on all the obscure conservative social media websites. That's my goal. So also buy the book, The Great Reset, Joe Biden and the Rise of 21st Century Fascism.
Yeah, absolutely.
Available on Amazon and wherever books are sold.
Chris Talgo, you got things to pitch nowadays.
StoppingSocialism.com. Go to it. Go to heartland.org.
Fantastic. That is right. And I will just say for the record, before I say my final sign off, that even with 4 hours of sleep, I stumbled and bumbled far less than the President of the United States during a State of the Union speech. So thank you all for tuning in to this episode. We will talk to you next week.